Hello, I'm Courtney Minor. This is my work, and I love it, but I guess I should give you some background about me, about the painting, about how I got to my style. I'm a self-taught artist. I've been creating collage and painting for about 5.5 years. Before that, I didn't do anything, like nothing at all. I got a few art awards when I was like in middle school, and then I just completely stopped, didn't do anything, took a normal corporate job and lived my life. But I always felt like I never really fit in. There was just something missing in my life. And so fast forward to, this is gonna sound crazy, but the advent of the iPhone had a camera in it. And a friend of mine was a writer and a photographer, and I started doing street photography with her all through New York City, just taking it with my iPhone because it had such clarity. And then as that progressed, that was like 2015, 2016. And then in the December of 2018 is when everything changed and I transitioned to becoming what you see now. I went to Vietnam and I was there for a month because I was having a really hard time in my day job, just really difficult. I couldn't seem to make the words and really get them to understand me and my point of view. And in a corporate environment, sometimes it can just be difficult if you're a creative person. And at the time, my boss was not the nicest person in the world. And I was like, I'm gonna get fired anyway. I might as well go to Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam and I was staying in my Airbnb in Ho Chi Minh City. And I was in my bed and I was just fiddling with my phone and I just started taking selfies. Now, one fun fact about me is that I hate posting selfies. Like I was like, I'm not gonna do that for social media. I'm not doing that, that's not me. But they had that new functionality where they have the in-suite studio. So I started just doing different shots and just me contemplating things in my life. And then I started scaling them. I started printing them out, which was a trial in Vietnam because I don't speak Vietnamese. So I was like, Kinko's, print shop, like they just didn't know what I was saying. So finally I found my previous Uber driver who did speak English. He helped me find a print house in Vietnam. And I just started doing all my scales. I started doing all the different sizes of all the photography I took there, of myself, of other people. And then when I was there is when I first started combining my own photography and my found objects together. I didn't know, I knew it was a collage, but I just thought, you know what? I'm just so stressed because I think I'm losing my job. I don't know where I'm going. And I made a few of those in Vietnam. And I came back to the United States, came back to New York, and I got this idea to sew into the little pieces of paper and canvas. And I ended up making like about 30 works between January of 2019 through about June of 2019. And one of my closest friends, who I was with last night, he came by my house. He said, oh, you've been collecting, because I am an art collector. He said, oh, you've been collecting. Who's this new artist you've been collecting? And I was like, oh, it's me. And he was like, what are you saying? I'm like, I made all of these. He's, oh, wow, you probably need to show these to people. And I was like, oh, come on, whatever. Nobody's gonna pay attention to it. I'm just making like collages. In my mind, it reminded me of the stuff that we would make for our family reunions. So I didn't think anything of it. I was like, whatever. And another friend happened to come by my house. She saw one work and then she happened to see, I had some pictures of my artworks on my phone. And that was interesting because she was like, you need to show your work. So I'm opening an Instagram account for you. I'm gonna get you a Hover account and I'm gonna get you a domain name. Because she knew me. I had to have a push, but once I have a push, I'll go full throttle. And so then I did that, and in parallel, she told another friend about my work, and she happened to be the curator for Marcus Samuelson's restaurants, for all of his art galleries that are in his restaurants. And she saw my work, she showed it to Marcus, and he loved it. And he's like, I need to see your portfolio. And I was like, oh. So I had to quickly make my Instagram. I had to quickly make a cheap website. Ooh, sorry, do you have any tissue? Sure. Sorry. And pretty much my whole life changed after that. My painting went up in Red Rooster, Harlem, which I know in the art world was like, oh, that's a no, you're not supposed to put your artwork in restaurants. But I was like, I don't know. I didn't know anything. But I was like, if it's Marcus Samuelson, I'm sure it's fine. And then my Instagram started to take off. And then that's when another like art friend was like, hey, you should show at some fairs. I'm like, I'm not signed to a gallery. I don't even know how to even go about doing that. And they're like, open a Saatchi art account and just see what happens. So I opened it. My work started selling rather quickly on the website. And that's when they invited me to show at the other art fair, which is an independent artist fair, but a really reputable one. And then I went to that fair, and this is all coinciding with COVID because that was 2019, everything got locked down. Then remember that period of time we had that open window for 4 or 5 months, and we all thought, oh, we're free before they locked down again. That's when they had the other art fair, and I sold out my booth. And that's when I was like, oh, I guess I could do this. And then now here I am, and there's other artists. Like at that fair, I met an artist that's a friend of this museum and the group, DeMarcus McCoy. And that's when he said, hey, you need to get connected with resources and this thing and that thing and that thing. So I got to talking to him because we were literally right next to each other in the fair. And Domino Effect, he told me about this. I was like, wow, okay, let me apply. Again, I applied. I never thought in a million years I would get accepted. And then here I am. And even when I walked into this exhibition, I was like, wow, my painting's like right there. That's amazing. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm also very open to this being interactive. Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me.
Why did they say you shouldn't be in restaurants?
Oh, because they believe that it might degrade the value of your work if it's early in your career. So like a lot of times there are artists who are like, hey, I want to show, so anyone who offers me, I'll show. But there is some truth to it because, prime example, the other art fair, they saw that my painting was hanging in Red Rooster, but because it was a celebrity chef, they deemed it okay. But if it wasn't, it would have actually been a ding against me. Because what they expect you to do is get into maybe a group show at a artist collective organization or a gallery, maybe potentially like how I got into this and start from there. For me, it was very organic. It started with my Instagram. It started with word of mouth, and then it spread from there. But yeah, it's a very real thing. So I tell other artists, I'm like, hey, if you just want to show, but if you have aspirations to maybe do larger institutions, try to make sure you get into a juried exhibition where there's a full jurors and then you're selected and then you're put in the show, or just apply to a group exhibition in any local galleries in your area and then get into that. That has more credibility in the art world than being hung up into a restaurant. So it's sad but true. The little nuances, because I didn't train in this, I was learning it along the way. So this one is called Standing on Top of the World, and it's a reference from a song, The Next Movement by The Roots. So some background on this painting is I won a residency here in New York City about a year ago. I was on Governor's Island on Art Crawl Harlem residency. And the theme of that residency was tied with the Hip Hop 50th. So they said, hey, create a body of work that represents hip hop or your connection to hip hop. And I'm a very emotional painter. And so I was like, I can't just do hip hop. I could easily do my graffiti style and I could have just written all the artists and lyrics and all that stuff. But for this body of work, I was like, I want to tie it to the songs. I'll tie it to the songs. So one of my favorite hip hop songs is The Next Movement by The Roots. And so what I did is I tried to think about what was the feeling, what was the moment, what was the memory when I first heard that song. And then that is what I was going to put on the canvas. So it wasn't going to be an overt ode to hip hop. It was just going to be my memory. So I remember when I first heard the song, it felt like I was just standing on top of the world, like I was floating. And what I did is I got an image of my brother's car. So my brother is a mega huge hip hop head, huge. And he had a Nissan Altima that was like his first car. We were sitting in our parents' driveway because we weren't allowed to listen to hip hop in our house at all. So that was like our little music oasis, and we would sneak it. He would be behind the steering wheel. I would be in the passenger seat, and we would pull out those old CD cases where it was like those big album portfolios, and he would have me flipping through. And with that, I remember he said, "Hey, I think you'll like this one." And he stuck the CD in, and it was The Roots, Things Fall Apart. And then he skipped to like track 3, and it was the next movement. And so me and my brother, I remember we were just bouncing in the car, just bouncing our heads and just like really feeling the music. And what I depicted here was originally I had some words, and I always have words and graffiti in all my artwork, even if it's hidden in plain sight. So if you get close, you'll see that there's tick marks here. So I wrote basically stream of consciousness, how I felt in that moment. I wrote it all over the back of this canvas. And I covered it in black paint because I wanted you to focus on the image and how it was suspended in the darkness. But I always like to have my own poetry, stream of consciousness, graffiti in all my works, even if it's not very apparent. And then I went, and these are all newspaper print. So I found a provider that allowed me to print on architectural sheets and newspaper print, because they were like, "Well, why do you want to do this? This isn't good paper." I'm like, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Can you just give it to me?" And so this lady, I met her. So she's like representing me, even though it's not me in the photograph, and how the feeling of I felt fly, I felt cool, I felt confident, and I just felt like I was floating. So I played with scale, of course, increased her size. And then I have my brother's Ultima here. And then this just represents all the cities and areas in which I heard hip hop around the world, because I'm an avid traveler. And I remember hearing battles and hip hop battles when I was in Tokyo, when I was in Okinawa. I remember hearing it when I was in Johannesburg, when I was in Sao Paulo. So I was like, hip hop really is everywhere. And I was like, how do I incorporate that element of my travels into this work? So I was like, let me put some cityscapes. And these are actual buildings that I photographed. And then I went into some local record stores in New York City and in Jersey City, because I live in Jersey City now. And I just took pictures of their cassettes and their albums and their vinyls. And then I made that the shape of some of the buildings that were in my photography and kind of sprinkled them in. So some of the buildings are buildings, and some of them are actual vinyl records and cassette tapes and CDs. And then finally, behind me, I have all of these, what I call radials. So in all of my works, especially if I have people in it, I always like to show the vibration, the energy wasting off of them. Or if they're deep in thought, I try to show that element with the lines and all of it coming out. So that's my version of showing energy and vibration and thoughts and feelings. Yeah. I'm still in my day job, but that's a whole other story. Oh, yeah. So I'm in market research. He was terrible. He was such a mean person, such a mean person. I was in market research. I was in a retail apparel company. And I still do that in a different company with a very different boss, because now I'm the boss. So I don't have anybody over me now, which is really helpful. But it always ties back to the energy, because like he was such a mean-spirited, some really mean person. He was not only mean to me, he was mean to everyone. Yeah, just very mean. And it took it out of me, because I'm like, it's one thing if you don't care for me. It's a very different thing if you disrespect me and my peers. That affects me. It makes me go inward. And I noticed I was going inward. And I was like, I have a choice to make. So I was like, he's probably gonna fire me anyway, so I might as well go. But when I came back, I wasn't fired, he got fired. And then my company was split into two, they merged it together, and then they gave me his job. Oh, wow. And yeah, and I'm still in that job. That's my day job, because artwork, gotta keep a day job. Huh?
You don't want to be a starving artist?
No, I don't like to starve too much. But I do, one thing is, before I was doing part-time with my artwork, I pretty much am full-time now with pro, especially with me showing, not only am I showing here, but I'm in a couple other museums now. I'm always in my studio, like usually 2-3 days a week. Everyone in my company knows I'm an artist, In fact, I designed one of their Black History Month shirts under at that time I had a pseudonym because I wanted to see if I was chosen based on my art, not because they knew me. And they're super supportive, like super supportive. I hear other artists complain and worry about my day job if they find out that I'm actually passionate about this, they might let me go. Or my day job, they don't care and they won't give me off if I win a residency or anything. I don't have that problem at all. So like for a lot of artists, they hate their jobs and they want to quit.
They got me.
I'm like, I'm good. And then like I had a residency earlier this year in France. I'm about to leave for another residency in Greece. But for me, I have unlimited PTO. So they're like, as long as you can keep your stuff going, go do it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, I'm very thankful. I know I have a situation that most artists who are working don't have. Yeah. Any other questions for me?
How old were you when you were in the car with your brother and listening to him?
Oh, I was probably like 11, 12. It's one of my favorite memories. I think about it all the time. That's why when he said, "Hey, hip hop," I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. So when I showed my body of work, because this is one of about 35 pieces I made on Governor's Island, these are all still tied to memories. And I said, if you look at the title of all the paintings, it says the memory or how I was feeling, but in parentheses, it says an ode to, and it says the song that was playing in the background that I was listening to. So this one is this size is one of 3. 2 of them are about next movement. They come to life in 2 completely different ways. My brother, I literally have a picture of me as a template, as a collage, and me and my brother, and it has our childhood photos, and I have all these found objects on it. Found objects. Like, and some I made myself, some it was like, okay, this does remind me of that moment, like how the leather felt in the car, and how, some of the seats were, split, because again, it was his first car. He was rough on it. So some of the cushion would come out. So I found cushion. I put that on the canvas. So that's what I did. And then there was a third piece called The Choices We Make. And that was based on a song by J. Cole, because I love J. Cole. And that one had a completely different subject matter. That one was focused on me and my past relationships and the choices that I made. And I'm glad you didn't select that one. This is a very wholesome exhibition. But I find that when people see all of the works together, because they all have Black backgrounds, because I wanted you to feel like you were suspended in a black hole. Also Blackness, Black. They all tie together well. And it's very clear once I explain, they're like, oh, it's all your memories with those songs. I'm like, exactly.
The Governor's Island was a hip hop
Yes.
painting.
Mm-hmm.
And you did 30 pieces.
Yeah, so that's
And how long were you there?
about a month. I go in spurts. When they told me I won the residency, they told me the theme like in March. And I'm not a sketcher. Like I don't sketch. So many times when the people say, oh, you're sketching, I'm like, no, I'm just making a small work. I don't really do that because I'm very stream of conscious. And I think that's why my work feels so raw. Huh?
You're very what?
Stream of conscious?
Okay.
Yeah?
No.
Am I what?
Yeah, what is it?
Oh, sorry. With a lot of writers, sometimes they'll have manuscripts, they'll have outlines, they'll have shells of what they want to write. And there's others who literally write what's in their head and just literally put it on the canvas, put it on the paper, streaming it right out their mind. That's me. I'm a stream of conscious writer. You rarely will see a work where you'll see something repeated because it's literally what I'm thinking in the moment is what I write and what I map out. It's just this one, it's hidden. My other works, it's very overt where I have white backgrounds and Black writing or other kind of backgrounds in Black writing. Yeah.
I have a question. When you were that child that won that prize, that art prize, and then you started to not do it, what made you stop doing art?
Fear. So I come from a family that's very conservative, very traditional, but also very practical. And they were like, Courtney, I'll never forget it. They sat me down, Courtney, you are a Black woman, a Black girl in America. They're like, the world's not gonna do you any favors. And they're like, me and your mom won't be here forever. And they're like, though we've set up stuff for you, because they set up like little funds and trusts and stuff like that. They're like, we still need to know that you can take care of yourself. So that means you need to go to college and you need to get a practical job. And so one thing in my family is very big on education. So it wasn't a question if I was going to go to college. They were more upset that I didn't continue after my bachelor's, because most of my family have masters and PhDs, and I stopped. I only got a bachelor's. I got a bachelor's in engineering. I feel like I did good, right? But that was what was in my head. They're like, you never know what can happen. You need to always be able to take care of yourself. And they're like, we know you're artistic, but we also know that you're very good at math. They're like, figure out something where you can do something with all of your skills and take care of yourself as well as we're taking care of you, or better. And that was the expectation they told me, my brother, my cousins, anybody my dad could talk to in the family, he would tell them. So it was almost like, though it was to strive for academic success, which is wonderful, it was always that nugget in my head where if I don't do something practical, I'm gonna be homeless. And it's an extreme reaction, but it was a very real thing, because like he started grooming me and my brother to understand and run businesses from when we could talk. Like when my dad was an executive at a software firm. So he would bring us in, and instead of my brother going to play basketball, he would let us understand how to read P&Ls and how much profit and loss. He said, how do you write, how do you read legal documents? We would spend hours reading legal documents. So that's how my dad, my mom, my uncles, all my family are. They're all very brainy. My aunt Sheila, she designed things she shouldn't design, but she works for the government and she's a professor at Pepperdine. So when I would be at her house, she would literally be showing me engineering manuals. And so my mom in high school, though I did like art, I liked architecture, I went to the engineering high school and I took college credits in engineering classes in high school. And then I went straight into engineering college. And even though I had minors in like hip hop studies and psychology and this, in my head, it was like, those are things that you love, but those aren't things that are gonna take care of you. It never entered my mind that I could potentially take care of myself with those other things.
Did you love engineering?
I loved it till I started working. When I started working, it got very rough. I was bored. Most engineers are extremely creative. They invent all kinds of things. The kind of creativity I wanted to do wasn't that. Even though I was good at it, it wasn't that. So I switched careers. I went from that to research. And even then, I keep doing all these jumps, trying to get closer to creativity when the creativity was always in me. Yeah. But it took me getting a camera phone to unleash it. Because up until that point, it was not a possibility. And even the little things I did create, I thought, who's gonna like this? Because I don't consider myself a very good illustrator. And in my mind, if you're an artist, you must be able to do photorealistic. That's how I thought. So I was like, if I can't do photorealistic, then I'm not an artist. Might as well not even try. Let me just go do something where I can take care of myself. That was my thought process. It never occurred to me to do abstract. I don't know why, I just didn't click. And turns out I'm good at abstract. Yes, thank you for that question. But yeah. Oh yeah, my mom took me to every type of museum all over the world. It was like, my love of traveling came from them. We constantly, and I loved it. And I always picked out collage artists. Okay. Always. Like, I didn't know I liked Ramari Bearden. I just knew when I was at MFAH in Houston, because I grew up in Houston, I always said, ooh, Mom, I like that one. Or, ooh, I really like this one. Or I liked graffiti. I didn't know that was a Basquiat. I hadn't, because my mom wasn't an artist, so she didn't just go, let me tell you about them. She didn't do that. She would just bring us and hope we would get enlightened. But she did all museums. She did history, she did science, she did art. And in the science museums, of course, her and my dad knew what everything was, so they would explain it to me more. They didn't know art, so they didn't explain it to me. So I just knew I liked it. I knew that I wanted to draw. I took art classes. Every art class, I got awards. I won state awards. And they were always super happy, but they just didn't, because they never came from that world. And they grew up in the South. And for Black folks in the South, we didn't have the luxury of pursuing a passion and maybe making a living at it. We barely had the luxury of working in a everyday normal job and taking care of ourselves because of blackball and y'all know. I don't have to say it. So it just seemed far removed. And then like in my dad's side of the family, there were a lot of creative people because my dad's side, they were either technical, military, or they were singers. And so on my dad's side, very like religious, they're still all like the lead singers of the Mississippi Mass Choir. So they're like, oh, if you're gonna do something creative, is that? I'm like, I can't sing and I don't wanna sing and I don't wanna be on stage. I don't wanna do that. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just put it out in my mind. Because I'm very, both a good thing and a bad thing is I'm very good about compartmentalizing. So if I'm like, if I can't do this or there's something where I'm thinking, oh, I'm not good enough at it, I just put it away. But I find that things happen for a reason and things happen at the right time because at that moment in time when I started collaging and started creating, I needed it. It was more art therapy than me creating art. Like I didn't even call myself an artist till probably 2019, 2020. When I sold out the booth, that's when I was like, oh, I guess I should start calling myself that now. But I didn't think of myself that way. Now I'm like, what was I thinking?
Now that you have achieved this kind of fame for yourself?
They are so supportive. My brother actually, he was gonna try and come here for this one, but he has a hard time in New York. Cause you know how there's multiple streets with the same names, different borough. He always ends up at the wrong location. It was a thing, right? Because I remember my opening of my first show, he was there, but he went to the one in Brooklyn. I'm like, we're in Harlem. You're gonna miss it. And he flew literally there for it, but he went to the wrong place because I had to go early to be with the curator and set up. But yeah, family they're super supportive. Like even this week, I knew I had the artist talk, I'm gonna be here. And then I found out that a museum in Stockton, California is taking one of my paintings, and then 2 museums in New Jersey, in Newark and Montclair are taking my paintings. So I have a family group chat, and so I just sent them the screenshot saying, you've been invited. They immediately went on FaceTime, they called me, they were celebrating, they were happy, like they were joyful. And I asked my mom, like, when I was exhibiting what she considers quirky traits, that she would say, you put weird colors together when I would dress. I would have all these like imaginary friends. I was always this way. She said, I thought I was protecting you by suppressing it. And I was like, oh, that's it. I said, I wonder how it would have been if you hadn't suppressed it. She said, you probably would have been an artist from jump. And I'm like, interesting. And I remember feeling like I was caged. But I love my mom. I love my dad. And they really thought they were doing the right thing for what they saw as a little Black girl in Texas. They thought they were doing the right thing. Because I still love this outfit. I thought it was cute. It was like a baby blue shirt. Well, it was a little ugly, but it was like corduroy, but it was like a brown. In my mind, I was like, oh, it's like the sky with a milk chocolate bar. And she thought, that's how I thought of it. And she was like, you can't wear that. People are gonna ostracize you. We already have pointed out enough because we're dark complexion and we're Black and this. No, every time I would pick out Lisa Frank with rainbows, she was like, no. So I got to the point where I learned I was very good at, I would show it a little bit, but not a lot, like in my clothing and my style. But I would never go too far because my mom is actually very conservative and I'm not. But it would come out in little ways. Like I remember my mom, she's a huge sci-fi fan, huge. And so at a young age, she had me reading, aside from Black history, because my mom was a history major, professor, all that. She had me reading Frank Herbert's Dune. Now everybody knows about it. But then I was like, just that random kid who read Dune. And I remember I got this idea to rewrite Dune and put everyone I knew in my life as the different characters and houses in the book. So basically Dune got like really Black really fast. But the fun fact about that is to create the sci-fi names. It was my first time playing with words and letters, which is what I use in my painting now. I started reversing all of my family's last names. It became, instead of Minor, it was Ronum. Instead of Courtney, it was Yintrock, right? And I would start making like dialects singing. And that's why I was always into linguistics, always have been. But the science of linguistics. And all those pieces, even with the suppression, have shown up in my art, because even when I'm writing and painting, sometimes I'll write legible, sometimes illegible, backwards, all different ways. People are like, oh, do you have ADHD? I'm like, no. They're like, are you dyslexic? I'm like, not at all. I just like to play with things. I like codes. I like puzzles. And that's what I was trained to do, because my dad wanted me to be a really great strategist. That's what he used to always say. You're going to be a strategist when you grow up. I didn't know what that meant. But doing mathematics, learning how to analyze situations, puzzles, patterns, looking for patterns. He trained me to do that. He just didn't know that those patterns would also show up in how I create art. Even my collection of photographs, because I've been taking photographs forever, I didn't realize I was looking for things with asymmetry and symmetry, and I would do it on purpose. It just didn't click that I was subconsciously doing what would become my style as an adult. No clue. So they helped me, but they weren't doing it on purpose. But they're super supportive. And working on a next body of work, which I hope they'll like, I might go against some of the things that they value. But as I push myself as an artist, I'm leaning into areas that I care about that usually don't have as much connection with how I was raised. But I think in the long run, they'll be supportive of whatever I create, because I'm definitely the oddball in my family. Definitely the strange one, for sure. Yeah.
Do you think engineering informs your work now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my favorite subjects in engineering was, I liked advanced calculus. So especially calculus 3, because it has a lot of geometry and trigonometry and all that stuff in it. I don't like proofs. And I remember when I would write, proofs are turning all of the written numbers into words that you could explain back. And you have to be able to explain how to solve it and how to prove that it can't be unsolved. I was not good at proofs. So I remember I used to just write patterns on my paper, and I still have them. And I looked at them and I was like, I wonder. So some of my first works, I would do that same style, and it truly informed how I do my graffiti, all of my typography. So it pops up in unusual ways. The other pieces are, as much as I like asymmetry, I do like symmetry. So I always say that my paintings have it's a maximalist, but it's like organized chaos. And I feel like that comes from my engineering background, because we were trained that anything that was ambiguous can be made understandable. Because it's all, engineering college is just training you to think differently. And I already thought differently, so it just amplified it. Yeah, definitely affected it, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions?
So one almost is like a springboard into the art. It's almost like a springboard having that background into the art.
It was.
So you can sort of take that and incorporate it into what you do creatively.
And I would say that piece, and then you probably heard earlier in my talk, in my corporate job, I switched from engineering and I changed fields. I changed fields a lot, it's just by nature. So I went from engineering to market research. A lot of my market research is in my painting, because I was trained to be an ethnographer, basically journalism, learning how to interview people, learning to understand people's micro tics, learning to see their triggers. So I have not this work, but a lot of my works, I have different forms of tiers, because in my field research, in my day job, I'm going into people's homes and their livelihoods, their life, and I'm usually seeing them in their raw state, because they always put on a good front when I first show up. But after me being there for 4 days, people crack. And what I was trained in my psychology background is to be able to see 2 or 3 levels under the surface. In my day job, it's very helpful. But in art, it helps me capture emotions quite well, whether it's joy, sadness, melancholy. And I try to match that with how I'm feeling and combine it. So a lot of my ethnographic training is in my paintings, especially this one. Because I picked her face because it's just, to me, it was very strong and very serene. And I remember when I was switching over to market research, they laid out a whole table of 200 faces that are supposed to represent different emotions. And we were trained to be able to identify all 200. And all of my direct reports in my day job, I make them do the same thing. Like, they need to know how to read micro ticks. And then sometimes I'm like, let me see when I'm photographing people, even when we're having conversations, I don't want to tell them because it might freak them out, but I can see, I'm like, oh, they're not telling me the whole truth, or they're not telling me the full thing. What are they showing in their body that they're not saying? So usually, even when I'm talking to them, what I capture, they go, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, it's okay.
You tell them or they see it?
They see it when I make it. I usually don't tell them in the moment, because sometimes I am capturing their joy. Like, they might be talking about, oh, I did this and I did that, but I might see that they have a little tick right here in their eye. And I'm like, oh, they're not telling me something. So then I'll change the subject to something completely different. And then usually I do it as a trigger to see, will that real emotion come to the surface? And usually about anywhere from 10 minutes to about 2 days into the process of me being with my different subjects, they always show their real self. And that's the photo I snap. And it's usually that they least expect. Yeah. So again, market research, psychology. Now, my new style, which is not, this is an evolution of it. I've been doing more and more abstract. So sometimes I use photography of people. Sometimes I'm not using any people at all anymore. I haven't released those works. I'm working on them. But again, it's a further evolution.
You haven't released them on Instagram yet.
Instagram, my website, I haven't shared it with gallerists, nobody. Yeah, because I want them to be ready. But the body of the work is called The Others. And it's about anyone who feels othered in their society. And what I've been doing is all the countries I've been to, because I've been to about 62 countries, I'm now going back. But going back with an artist lens and trying to find who's the minority groups in those countries that are not shown in advertising. Who are the people who are part of subcultures? Like in the United States, it's easy because I grew up here. I know who they are. But when I go to Colombia, when I was living in Mexico, one, it's a history lesson, and two, I discover all the people that probably feel like me, whether it's for their ethnicity, their gender identity, their economic status, whatever it is. That's what I'm trying to capture. So a couple of the countries I used to travel to, right now they're at war, because I used to go to Russia a lot. I would go to Ukraine, Israel. I went to Israel every year, most of my young life, because I was in a Jewish private school. I can't go. So I'm trying to hit all the other countries as much as I can and actually take photography and sketch and create miniature works that I can create as a body and bring back to create the large works. Because No, so those sketches are like little ones. So it's not like I'm using charcoal or a pencil. So what I might do is I often are y'all artists? Yeah? So y'all know Posca markers. So I'll bring a Posca marker and I'll start just writing what I'm feeling when I'm in the moment. And then what I might do is when I come back to my studio, I'll dunk that sheet of paper in tea water or in paint. And then I'll photograph it. And then I'll rip it up. And so all of my little pieces, what I call artifacts, are going to become the larger works, which are usually humongous works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say that process one more time.
It's complicated. So my works are a lot more complicated than they look. So sometimes it'll be a blank sheet of paper. Other times it'll be a photograph. Sometimes it's a cloth I found on the street. Sometimes it's a leaf. Whatever it is. Oftentimes I kind of write, doodle all of it. It's not sketching. It's just almost like stick figures. It's not a true sketch. And then I'll set it to the side and I'll just keep going and I'll keep going. And then I'll wake up probably 2 a.m. and I'm like, let me put this with that. And I'll glue it. And then I'll rip it and I'll tear it apart. And I'll just set aside both pieces. And then I might not look at it again for 3 months. And then I'll come bring them all back. And then I'll get this idea. And then that piece that I tore at the top that I thought didn't look good with the whole piece becomes the foot on one of my collages. Another one becomes part of the building. Another one becomes the sky. Another one becomes something that's in a completely different painting that isn't even with the one I'm doing. So it's like I make all my collage pieces, but it's a very iterative process. Especially when I'm writing, on paper or canvas, many times I like to dunk it in things, whether it's acid. Sometimes I'll burn it and then stop the burn process and then sit it aside and then grab it later. Yeah, it's very organic. But I've been trying to document it more, but it's just so in the moment. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. When I left my residency earlier this year, I had a death in the family and it really affected me. And I couldn't get back to the United States right away. So I said, let me go relax. So I went to a hammam. And in the hammam, they had all of these pigments and dyes. And I dunked my hand in it. I wasn't supposed to do it. I dunked my hand in it and I just started touching the tablecloth. And the guy was like, what are you doing? I said, I'll buy it. I swear, I'll buy it. And so I bought it. And then I took it, I cut it up into pieces, and now it's in my new work. And then I might re-dye it. I might write on it. I might draw it. I might collage on it. But it comes from that moment when I was feeling that pain of my cousin's death. That's the root, even if there's 15, 20 layers on it. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You have this new other series, and you also have your job expertise, and then you sold out the fair, opening your own gallery for like artists of color or something.
That's amazing that you said that. Another artist and I, we met in France, and you think my work's amazing, you should see her work. Her work is phenomenal. We're both collage artists. We both bring it to life very differently. And we were lazy night in the chateau. We were literally drinking bottles of wine. And she was like, we should start something. And I was like, yeah, maybe. Because I have no issue starting a business. I own 2 businesses. So I was like, that's no big deal. But I didn't know if she was serious or not. And then while we were there, we realized because it's so hard for especially women of color to get signed to galleries, sometimes it's easier just to start your own and then bring people in. Because if you want to get a lot of collectors, most of the collectors send their art advisors and their art consultants to the major fairs to source work from a gallery, and then it goes into people's homes and their collections and the corporate collections. But if you're not invited to the fair because you're not signed, your work doesn't really get seen beyond social media. And most of the major collectors honestly don't use social media. They don't, right? So the only way in is to form your own gallery. So that's when we were like literally drunkenly up 2 nights in a row talking about this. And now we've just talked about it recently, and it's gonna be real. So we're aiming to do it maybe next year. We're going back and forth on names, where we're gonna LLC it, how we're gonna do it, what fairs we wanna do. And then we're starting off with me, her, and then probably 2 other artists of color. But I said either color or varied gender identities, because I was like, we need to make this as inclusive as possible, but stop. Like, that's the problem with the others, is that they don't include enough of us. So that's our plan. I'm curious to see what we're gonna do. Like, I have a few ideas. I know how to make a business plan. My dad taught me well. But yeah, I have a feeling it's gonna launch. Again, and this is the first time me saying it in public. Hey, I'm on film. But yeah, we're looking to do that because we're like, how else are we gonna get our art to Art Basel or the Tokyo Art Fair? Like, I've attended all those events and I'm like, we could be here. And when we looked at the paperwork, all it takes is you have to have a certain amount of signed artists, usually like 4. You need to have a presence. I'm like, oh, we can do this. Yeah, more to come.
I have a question.
Yeah.
First, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this exhibition.
Absolutely.
And it's been fantastic. We've had a couple of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great to speak with you, get to know you a little bit, meet your mom.
Yeah, y'all met my mom.
I'm so honored and humbled to work with Jeremy and work with you, Courtney, and the other artists. I don't know, speechless. One thing that strikes me is during these talks, and the theme of the exhibit Reclamation, tried to have voices and objects and whatever the object is, but some there, and then connect it with the people who are making these things or having a connection to these things. I think it's everything you just shared with us, which is tremendous, on the wall for your piece. I think it's like Mixedia.
Yeah,
And it doesn't even begin to.
it doesn't.
That speaks to the idea of what the Reclamation exhibit is about. We may have these beautiful objects, but to think that, to always remember that there's people behind the objects, there's stories, there's lives, there's memories, there's so much meaning. And even in this space, and just the tables or the rugs, they're all like that too. And we learn so much if we don't think about that, but there's other stories, and you're, what's the word? Honest. And also, I feel energized being you. Yeah, I can do this.
Yeah.
And you have a fabulous energy, and I wish you so much success.
Thank you.
Works.
Thank you.
And your marketing job too.
Yeah.
But my question was, what interested you in the call to submit your work?
Yeah.
Because it was a very random thing to do for this museum to seek out such a extensive collaboration with artists of color and to work with Jeremy. Of course, there's this history for good and bad in this space where there's a lot of legacies of tension and exclusion, and that's all part of the story too. But to acknowledge that and then see what we can do to move, not past it, but move through it.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what drew you to this?
Yeah, it was multiple things. One, it was recommended because DeMarcus was like, Jeremy's a good dude. You need to look at whatever he's posting. And I was like, okay, I'll look at it, right? So that was the first thing. Second thing is when I saw the theme, I was like, that fits me. So I'm all about artifacts. And then the third, let me add to that, artifact. So like to me, any object, sooner or later is gonna become an artifact further you go in time. So I can either just have someone randomly find my shoe, or I can have them have an artifact of my painting. And especially as a woman of color, a Black woman in this country, reclaiming our history is extremely important, especially when it's been erased, it's been whitewashed. And I'm like, if I can tell my history and it's in a place where I can speak about it, I'm always game for that, right? Especially for the Black experience. It's such a varied experience. And I know that the way I grew up was different from some of my friends. I had an uncommon, unusual background, which I won't get into now. But I was like, we hear it all the time with people, we want to tell our stories. And I'm like, yeah, this exhibit is saying, let's reclaim that space, the history, our culture, and go from there. The thing that stood out to me, which is why I was so shocked that I got accepted, because I was like, again, with my other series, I am focusing on not only Black folks, but indigenous whatever country you're in. And I was like, oh, I hope I'm not overstepping. I was really worried about that. I almost sent you a message. Should I even be applying to this? But then I read it again and I was like, no, they're embracing all the different types of minorities. I'm gonna put my story in there. I'm gonna put my painting in there, which is a tribute really to not only hip hop, but to my brother, because I love him to death. He's the one that taught me everything I know about hip hop. And I was like, I'm gonna take a chance. Because every time I either am invited or apply to an exhibition or show, I'm extremely nervous. I'm nervous, am I overstepping? Do I have a right to be here? And not necessarily a right as a person of color or a female, but just, am I good enough? And then I'm always shocked. And my friend was like, you need to stop being so shocked. And I'm like, I'm always shocked because artists, we know for every 2 we get, we might lose 20. So when you get one and you find out it's one that you're like, oh, I really did want to be a part of that. And I was nervous and I got selected. I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled when I got the email. And for it to tie back to something as beautiful as that, and with all these artists who are amazing, yeah. Why wouldn't I apply? Yeah.
Jeremy, I guess as the curator, what drew you to Courtney's piece? So I guess you submitted two.
Yeah, and I have no idea.
I think your piece is just so bold. Just like on the surface, it's already beautiful, but the statement of reclamation just comes forth so easily. So there's so much meaning and stories behind it, and it features you as well. So the depth of the piece is really strong. And just hearing you speak today, just adds so much to it as well.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed by your art, by you as a person.
Okay.
For being roommate all the way up to speak with us as well.
Absolutely.
So much.
Yeah.
And something else that strikes me, I'm just like, Bob, you're so wonderful because your work and also the stories you tell about it, it's energizing.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I'm so glad you're part of the show, and in many ways you're part of the story of this place as well. So
That's nice.
I'm so wonderful. It's great.
Yeah.
But something that strikes me, many of the pieces, not all, but many of them have that, like there's a lot of personal memory, and your experiences doing the marketing research, ethnography, and psychology. I think it ties the reclamation. This conversation has been so enlightening because it reminds me that not only is it about reclaiming just the narratives that bring the stories forth, it's about who gets to remember and who and how did they do it, and what is their training and their background, and all of these things really matter in our world, for better or worse.
Yeah.
Who gets to have those memories and share them? I think it's very important, not just for today, but as we continue to try to tell stories about this place in Southampton, that this is a really important thing to keep in mind.
It is.
That not everybody is always able to create a record and to remember, and that's hard. It's not just personal, it means so much to everyone, especially the community, to say, yeah, we want to see how everybody has remembered and try to be creative about it too, because unfortunately so many people in the past did not get to participate in the way we can today. So but just think about that. It's beautiful to have you here and to be able to do this show and everybody and give people that opportunity now today.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can do more to bring out the past. I don't know how that's going to be, but certainly creativity is going to play.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.